Hi friends, if you want to support me and more of this type of content, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps promote my channel. Thanks. Chapter 11, Darcy. The FIB had been searching Air Tower for the past 2 hours, and I sensed from the banging and clattering around from the floor beneath mine that it wouldn't be long until they checked this corridor. Even though Tori and I had hidden the gold in the woods last night, I kept looking under my bed in case we missed a piece. It would be just our luck to decide to stay at the academy and then be kicked out from stealing from an heir. I was dog tired, but at least my corridor hadn't been the first on their list to search this morning. They must have been here since before dawn. Room searches! Get your doors open and stand in the corridor. I recognized Francesca's voice out in the tower, and my heart turned over. I tried to go back to sleep for a while, but it was impossible knowing the FIB were on their way here. I moved to my door, drawing my shoulders back and schooling my expression into indifference as I stepped out of my room in my PJs that were a pair of black shorts and a tank top. I'm not guilty, so why do I feel like a criminal? I let my door swing wide and placed my back against the wall beside it. Francesca and a team of FIB marched along the hallway led by Orion. He had a savage look on his face that made my heart pound a little harder. The closest room to him wasn't open, and he immediately marched up to it and bashed his fist against the wood. I didn't know much about the girl whose room it was, only that I'd seen her hanging out with Kylie a few times. "Out!" he demanded, and then produced a strange-looking key from his pocket, a slim silver thing with multiple prongs on the end. He slid it into the lock, and a girl squealed the second he threw the door open. A guy darted out of the room, tugging up his pants and laughing his head off as he veered around the FIB and out of sight. The girl emerged a second later, hugging a sheet to her chest. "I need 5 minutes!" she yelled at Orion. But he released a blast of air from his palm that shoved her out of his way before he marched into her room. A member of the FIB headed after him while Francesca directed units to the other rooms. Diego exited his room down the hall, looking at me with a frown. "You good?" he mouthed, and I nodded, offering him a playful eye roll. He took out his atlas, tapping something on it, and a second later, mine pinged. I leaned back into my room, plucking it off of my nightstand and reading the private message Diego had sent me on Facebook. Diego, FML, want to grab breakfast from the orb after this? I tapped out a reply with a smile. Sure, I need to stop at Mars Labs on the way though. I looked up as I sent the message, and Diego gave me a questioning look. I'd done a little digging and discovered that the items I needed for my hair regrowth were kept in stockrooms at the labs. I pointed at my hair and then tapped out another response and explanation. Darcy, Operation Hair Repair. Your mission? Should you choose to accept it, is watching out for teachers while I borrow some ingredients. Diego snorted a laugh as he wrote a reply. Borrow? Darcy, winky face. Someone yanked my atlas from my hands and I jolted, glancing up to find Orion thoroughly in my personal space. Something funny, Miss Vega? He asked lightly. I couldn't seem to wipe the smile from my face, so I bit down on my lip to try and hide it. I shook my head in answer to his question. He cast an eye down at my messages, and that was enough to stifle my amusement. Hey! I grabbed it back from him, and his eyes flickered with dark shadows. Why was he always nosing into my private life? Have you got any contraband in your room? He asked. No, sir, I said honestly, while a member of the FIB barreled inside and started rifling through my things. Not yet, anyway, he murmured so only I could hear, and then walked away towards the next room. I fought a grin as I watched him in my periphery. Well, you put me up to it, Professor. I locked my fingers around my atlas, watching Orion as he weaved in and out of the rooms, his brow furrowed in concentration. What's he thinking? Ah, give me that! Diego's voice caught my attention, and I spotted him wrestling a wooden box out of the arms of an FIB agent. He hugged it to his chest, and Orion came at him with the speed of a charging rhino. I gasped as he raised a hand, casting a force of air that slammed Diego back into the wall, lifting him off of his feet. The box clattered to the floor, and laughter broke out around me as the other students grouped together to watch. I hurried to help, horrified that he'd attacked Diego like that. "Let him go!" I caught Orion's arm, yanking him backwards, but he cast a gust of air at me that swept me off my feet and sent me flying down the corridor. I crashed into the legs of several students who only laughed harder. None of them offered me a hand up to help. I ground my teeth, pushing myself upright and marching back towards them. Orion scooped the box up from the floor while Diego kicked against the wall trying to get free. "Don't touch that, you asshole! It belonged to mi abuela." Diego roared, but Orion ignored him, smashing the box against the wall full force, making my stomach lurch in shock. It cascaded into 100 broken shards, and among the debris was a bunch of photographs of Diego tucked under the arm of an elderly woman. Between it all was a red journal, which Orion promptly snatched off the floor. "Let me down, tú eres un pedazo de mierda, vampiro escoria." Diego bellowed, making the walls shake. I'd never seen him so mad, and whatever the hell he just said, I sensed that it was not, "Please, can I get down, sir?" "Anyone care to translate that?" Orion asked the corridor, flipping the first page of the book open. "Although your tone is enough to land you in detention already, Mr. Polaris." Diego's eyes flared with hellfire as he stared at Orion with more hatred than I'd ever seen in someone's eyes. "You want a translation? I called you a piece of shit vampire scum because that's exactly what you are." "Diego!" I gasped, begging him to stop with my expression, but when he met my gaze, his fury melted away and desperation took its place as he turned back to Orion. "Don't read it," he begged, as Orion cleared his throat loudly. "Sir," I said firmly, walking towards him a little more warily this time. "Oh good, it's in English." Orion smiled cruelly. "I just write journal entries to practice the language is all," Diego growled. "You don't need to read it." "September 1st, Orion said loudly. "I found the awakening to be even better than expected. I think I may have made my first friend." He paused for effect, and laughter carried from the other students. Even a few of the FIB joined in. My stomach churned and anger burned in my chest at him humiliating Diego like this. Francesca leaned against the doorway, watching Orion with an expression that suggested he was telling a lovely bedtime story. Orion flicked over a few more pages, grinning darkly. September 3rd. He was getting cold. Hard revenge on Diego for insulting him. But wasn't pinning him up against the wall and breaking his prized possession enough? "I think I'm becoming attracted to someone of the Pegasus Order. Is it the way she glides through the sky, leaving trails of glitter in her wake? Or maybe it's the way the glitter remains on those alluring eyes of hers, even in her fae form. Sophia Cygnus gets more than my heart throbbing." "Lance," Francesca chuckled in the gentlest of warnings. And I imagined that mainly was because she wanted to get on with her job. "We're just getting to the good bit," Orion said with a smirk as he looked to Diego. "Or are you going to stop me?" There was a challenge in his tone, and I had the feeling he genuinely wanted him to fight back. Diego struggled harder, casting air into his hands, but it wasn't nearly enough to force off Orion's binds. "No." "Then I'll continue." He gazed down at the page, his brows jumping up as he silently read the next line. I stalked forward before he could read it out loud, furious at Orion, at everyone in this academy for being such cruel, unforgiving bullies. "Stop it!" I yelled as he opened his mouth. Magic twisted through my veins and tangled together in a way I hadn't experienced before. Vines flooded from my hands, and fire of the deepest blue swept down them in a blazing line of fury. Orion immediately whipped a hand out, tugging the oxygen from the air and dousing the flames. I gritted my teeth, willing the vines to wrap around him as he wielded the air with expert skill to keep them away. Through sheer determination, I managed to lock one around his throat, gripping him backward so he slammed to the floor. The vine slithered away in an instant as shock jarred my heart and made my magic die in a wave. Diego kneeled down with a groan, gathering up the pieces of his broken box and stuffing the photos into his pocket. Orion was still clutching onto the journal as he sat upright, rubbing the back of his head. I tentatively moved closer and crouched down before him. A heated lump burned in my throat as I reached out and prized the book from his hand, passing it wordlessly behind me to Diego. I couldn't drag my gaze away from Orion as he stared at me unblinkingly. The FIB were moving again, ordering the students out of their way while they continued their search. Orion's mouth tugged up one corner and his dimple punctured his cheek. "I was hoping you'd do that," he said in a low voice. I frowned in confusion, unsure what to say to that. "I just attacked you," I said in disbelief. "I'm waiting for my punishment here." I moved to stand and he caught my wrist, using my momentum to help himself up. I glanced at Diego to see if he was all right, and I could tell his pride was injured more than his body. Orion suddenly fisted his hand in the short ends of my hair, and I yelped in alarm as he dragged me to him and dug his fangs into my throat. I was too slow to react, and my magic was immediately immobilized. He released a feral noise as I went slack in his arms, and a deep shiver gripped my bones. People barely even glanced our way, as if this was a completely normal occurrence. And I thought I was starting to get used to seeing Caleb bite Tori's neck instead of her wrists. Nothing quite compared to being in the jaws of a beast myself. Diego was muttering to himself in Spanish as he marched into his room and kicked his door closed. "Oh, thanks, buddy." Orion's arm slid tightly around my waist, and my eyes drifted closed as the pain ebbed away, replaced by something much more delicious. And definitely forbidden. I clutched onto his arm and his muscles flexed beneath my fingers, eliciting a soft, barely perceptible moan from my lips. His bite deepened, and though I knew he must have heard me, I prayed he'd mistake it for a whimper of pain. "I don't like this, I don't like this, I don't like this." I kept telling myself that it would absolutely stop my veins from sparkling and my head from spinning. He finally extracted his fangs, but his mouth lingered on my neck a second longer than was appropriate. His lips pressed against the bite for what could only have been a millisecond, but I felt every corner of my being, like the ground had just dropped away beneath my feet. He stepped back, and I tried to process the mad power play that had just passed between us. He wiped the corner of his mouth with his thumb, and I sensed that he was hiding a smile. "Don't forget you have detention with me on Saturday." He strode off, just like that, and I didn't move for several long seconds. I finally turned around and found the corridor emptying out. The last of the FIB were walking away empty-handed, but I spotted Francesca lingering by the exit as she waited for Orion. He joined her, and as they walked away, I didn't miss the way she rubbed her shoulder against his, or how she slid her hand possessively onto his arm. Some deep animal instinct inside me made my upper lip curl back, as if I was about to snarl like a beast. A door banging beside me tore me out of that strange sensation, and I found that Diego had returned, tugging on a dark green coat. "So are we still going to the Mars Labs?" He grunted, adjusting his beanie hat with a heavy grimace. I felt a pang of annoyance towards him for abandoning me to Orion's teeth after I'd stuck my neck out for him. "I can manage," I muttered. He sighed heavily. "Sorry, chica," he said gently, stepping closer. "I flip out sometimes. I knew it was best just to put some distance between me and Orion for a moment. I didn't mean to run off on you. Thanks for what you did." He nudged me, and I broke a small smile at the weight of my chest lifting. "Come on, let me make this up to you by helping you sort this out." He rubbed my head, messing with my hair, which didn't mean much considering the current state of it, but my mood brightened by a mile as I realized that might be about to change. "Let's go then," I beamed. "Put on something warm, it's raining out there," Diego said, pointing at my PJs. "Sure, give me 2 minutes." He laughed. "You'll be longer than that when you see what they've done. Knock for me when you're ready. He headed back into his room, and I hurried away in a panic, speeding through my door. My mouth fell open as I found the place completely torn apart. The contents of my drawers were all turned out, my clothes had been pulled out haphazardly, and the mattress was flipped up. I scowled, hauling it back into place and shoving things back into my drawers. I kneeled down and pulled out my nightstand drawer, which was remarkably in order, except I sucked in air, rummaging through the few items I kept in it, but it wasn't there. Astrom's card was gone. My heart thumped heavily in my ears, as if I was hearing underwater. Francesca knew about it already. Why would she or her agents take it? Maybe they just needed to double check it? But then why didn't they tell me? Surely I would have been questions if they thought it was suspicious. Death. A voice rolled over me, which made my spine turn into a pillar of ice. I looked up from where I was kneeling on the floor, finding Seth in the doorway, twirling Astrom's card between his fingers. Do you know what this card means? He asked slowly, as if he was playing with his food. After I'd unleashed my power on Orion and he'd drunk from my source, I wasn't in a position to even attempt to fight Seth off. Crying out for help was pointless and humiliating. So I rose to my feet and faced him, trying not to let my hands shake. I didn't answer his question, but he went on anyway. Finality, he purred. The end. He stepped into my room, his aura filling the air with poison. Do you think it's about us? He flipped the card over, pretending to find Astrom's inscription for the first time. But if he'd stolen it from my room while the commotion went on in the hallway, he sure as hell had time to read it. I made a mistake, and now my time's up. The shadow has discovered me, and there's no hope for me to escape their wrath. The answers you seek are hidden between Leo and Libra. Don't trust the flames. Claim your throne. He spoke the final words like they were a curse on the world. Tell me who wrote this. His coercion was powerful, and I was completely unprepared to block it. The name tumbled from my lips before I could even attempt to hold it back. Professor Astrom. Seth mulled over for a moment. So this shadow killed a teacher. They must be someone very bad. He stalked closer, and I fought the burning instinct to recoil, refusing to let him see me intimidated. But no one's badder than me, he said in a wolfish growl that made my heart jolt. What do you want? I asked in an even voice, reaching for the card, but he lifted it above my head out of reach. Asshole. He puckered up his lips. A kiss. That's the price for getting it back. I'd rather bite off my own tongue, I spat. He laughed darkly. That would be a shame. I was looking forward to feeling it wrapped around mine again. You're deluded, I said, swiping the card once more, but he was so tall that he just flipped his hand up to keep it away from me. My hands balled into fists, and I tried to figure out a way to get him out of my room and take the card in the process. Come on, one little kiss. I'll even give you back your hair. He twisted his wrist to taunt me with the blue braid latched around it. Anger burned through me like acid. What's your problem? I snapped. Why the hell do you want me to kiss you? The hard wall in his eyes lowered a fraction, and he dropped his hand, flipping the card between his fingers with expert skill. Maybe makeup sex is what we need to dispel all of this tension, he said, conjuring a lustful smile. I eyed the card, knowing lunging for it again was pointless, so I really only had one choice. Get out! I turned my back on him, and it was one of the biggest insults you could offer in Solaria. He growled deeply in his throat. Pure wolf. Fear gripped me. I shut my eyes, willing myself not to move, not to run, not to do anything, even though I just offered myself up as an open target. You live in my house, babe. That makes you a part of my pack, and I'm your alpha. I'm not part of any pack, so go alpha fuck yourself, I hissed, my voice shaking a fraction as I pushed the words out that surprised even me. He snatched my arm, forcing me to face him. His eyes glowed with anger, and my throat tightened with fear as he glared down at me. You don't choose the pack chooses you. And as long as you're in these walls, and I say you're in my pack, you adhere to my wolf hierarchy, which, if you hadn't realized, you're at the bottom of, babe. So if your alpha says howl, you ask how loud. I yanked my hand free, and in the same movement, I snatched the card from his grip. I tugged it straight down the back of my skirt, and his eyebrows cocked. Is that an invitation? He smirked, and I raised my hands warily. If you touch me, I'll blast every ounce of energy I have at you, I whispered, my voice lost to fear. Please don't touch me. I don't have much power left. His brows knitted sharply together. I'm only joking, Darcy. He surveyed my expression and took a step back, his features skewing. I don't know what you and your vile friends are capable of. I pointed at the door. Get out. He backed up again. What does the riddle refer to? What answers are you looking for? That's none of your business. I could just coerce you again, he said, though it didn't sound like he was keen on the idea. I ground my teeth, not wanting to be forced, but volunteering the information would equate to the same thing. We have 1,000 questions since we arrived in Solaria, I said, my tone accusing, because he knew we were clueless in this world, and he and his friends had still tried to destroy us over a throne we didn't want. Aestrom could have been referring to anything. Leo and Libra, he murmured, running a hand through his hair. Well, if Aestrom was referring to Darius and Orion, you're gonna be in the dark forever. The day they answer your questions is the day hell freezes over. I frowned, momentarily distracted from the fact that there was a hungry wolf in my room. Orion is my liaison. He has to tell me about my past. He laughed coldly. Do you actually think he tells you everything? He leaned closer, lowering his voice. Even I don't know what shit he and Darius get up to. Their lies run so deep, even their friends get kept in the dark. He released a low, doggish whimper, rubbing the back of his neck like that fact deeply upset him. And I was surprised when he kept talking, and wondered if he was actually trying to offload on me right now. Arrogant jerk. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love Darius. But I know he lies straight to my face sometimes. Whatever he and Orion are up to, it's pure sin. Seth? He looked at me, smiling as if we were best friends, and I wanted to rip his face off for it. Yes, babe? Get the hell out of my room, and don't ever come back here again. He pressed his tongue into his cheek, moving to the door and stroking the band of blue hair around his wrist. I hated him so viscerally it hurt. And he was wearing my wound, brandishing it for the entire school to see. It wasn't like I could ever reattach it, but I still wanted it back. See you soon, weakling. He headed away, and a ragged breath left my lungs as the fear inside me finally gave way to relief. I leaned against the wall for a moment, catching my breath, replaying the conversation in my mind. Perhaps I hadn't won, but I hadn't lost either. When I felt grounded again, I shut the door and headed to the bathroom. I showered quickly and then changed into my uniform, tugging on a black raincoat over the top of my navy blazer. I pulled on my boots and headed to the door. My fingers hovered over the handle. He's not out there, just move. I lifted my chin and stepped outside, walking to Diego's room and knocking. He answered a second later, and some of his dreary music carried to me from his atlas. He turned it off, seeming depressed as he stepped into the hall after me. Breakfast would be ready at the orb by now, and I wanted to meet Tori there to tell her about the crazy couple of hours I'd had. And I seriously wanted to discuss the new theories on this tarot card. It didn't seem right that Aestrom would point us towards Darius and Orion for answers. He'd openly stated how much he disliked the two of them. My mind spun as Diego and I headed out of the tower into a sheet of rain. I pulled up my hood and Diego did the same, following me along in silence as I led the way towards Mars Laboratories. Rain splashed up from the stone path, and when we reached the track that cut through the Wailing Woods, we found it had turned into a muddy bog. I tiptoed along the edges of it while Diego slogged through, his hands stuffed into his pockets and his eyes on the ground. "Are you all right?" I called to him, using the jutting roots of the tree to make a careful path over the mud. My foot slipped more than once, but miraculously I didn't fall on my ass. "Yeah," he said glumly. "You sure?" I pressed, giving him a hopeful look to see if he might open up. He huffed heavily. "It's that vampire," he growled. "Screw Orion! Who does he think he is?" My heart twisted weirdly in my chest, and I looked up at the canopy above, blinking as raindrops dotted my cheeks. "He's not all bad." "Are you serious?" he snapped. "I mean, he's a total dick, but I think it's his teaching style." "Darcy Vega, please tell me you're not standing up to the guy who just broke mi abuela's carved trinket box." He blinked, and for a moment I was sure tears were swimming in his eyes. "Oh, Diego, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that." I balanced precariously on a root as he came to a halt ankle deep in the mud at the heart of the path. He sniffed heavily, and I gave up on keeping my boots clean, dropping off the root into the mud and squelching my way towards him. He sniffed again. "Your shoes are getting ruined," he murmured. "It's okay," I said. "You can buy me a new pair," I teased, and he snorted a laugh. "You really are becoming fey, chica." He pushed at my shoulder, and I released a small laugh. "Tell me about your, abuela. Was she the woman in the photo?" He nodded. "My grandmother," he said thickly. "She was the only person in the world who really cared about me, you know?" I frowned, rubbing his arm in the rain as it cascaded down on us through the canopy, the scent of wet, damp rising in the air. "Was?" I asked gently. "She died last year," he choked out. "Now I'm all alone." "I thought you had family," I said, gazing into his soft blue eyes. "I do. They're just not proud of me. They sent me here to prove my worth, and I feel like I'm failing them." "You're not," I promised. "We've only been here a few weeks. What more can you do?" "I don't even have my order yet," he muttered. "Neither do I." I prodded him, and he cracked a smile. "Guess you're as useless as me then, huh?" he teased. "But from the way you knocked down Orion on his ass earlier, I'd say you're gonna be just fine in this place. You belong here. I'm just a misfit." "We're all misfits," I said, as we started walking again, trudging along in the puddles. "Every freshman in this place is just trying to make it through their own way. You've got a good heart, Diego. That doesn't mean that you don't fit in here. In my opinion, this place could use a few good hearts." Diego took a hold of my hand, and my mouth opened and closed. I didn't know what to do, so I just left it there, my icy fingers cupped in the warmth of his. Okay, this is weird. As we exited the trees, I pulled my hand free, pretending to adjust my hood. An awkward silence descended as we closed in on Mars Laboratories. But the closer we got, the more my mind swung to the task at hand. Students were darting into the shelter of the orb as the rain beat down harder, and I quickened my pace towards the labs, keeping my head low until I ducked into the red brick building. The walls were painted a murky blood orange, and murals of the planet Mars were splashed across them. I quickly realized I had no idea where I was supposed to locate these ingredients, and I only had one real way of finding out. I took my atlas from my satchel while Diego started admiring the artwork on the walls. I navigated my way to the private email services and tapped out a message to Orion. Darcy, quick question. I'm in Mars Labs. Could you give me a little clue as to where I might find certain ingredients? I went to put my atlas away, wondering if we'd have to head to the orb for a while until he replied, but before I'd even touched my bag, a notification flashed up on it. A stupid grin bit into my cheeks as I found a message waiting from Orion, aka Lance, which I simply could not imagine ever calling him. Lance. 3rd floor, Lab 306, 6633211. Will the ends still be blue? I reread the last line a few times, unsure why the hell he would ask me that. Why on earth he cared? I didn't have time to answer, so I stuffed the atlas in my bag and jogged over to Diego, grabbing his arm and drawing him to the stairway. We headed up to level 3 and I checked if the coast was clear through the window. Right. You keep watch, text me if anyone's headed this way, I said. If anyone asks you why you're here, just say you're waiting on someone. Okay, Diego agreed, looking miles happier than when we had left. Good luck. I nodded, my heart pounding madly as I stepped into the long corridor and walked down at a casual pace. My coat was still dripping wet, leaving a puddle behind me as I went so hurriedly. I unzipped it, stuffing it into my bag as I closed in on room 306. Will I dye the ends of my hair blue again? I hadn't thought beyond regrowing it, let alone ordering dye to the school to return it to the color of my hair. I'd had it that way to remind me of the past, to never trust anyone again. But did I really need the reminder these days? I found the lab, which was split into rows of long worktops. The door was unlocked, but the second I stepped inside, I spotted a professor at his desk. I froze, waiting for him to rebuke me, before realizing he was asleep. His head was craned back, and as he dozed in the chair, his mustache fluttered as he released a snore. My gaze locked on the metal door behind him. I could run, bolt, but I'd come this far already. Fuck it. I plucked up my nerve and moved as quietly as I could across the room. I stepped past the desk, adrenaline pumping as I approached the door. It was locked with a key code, and I silently thanked Orion as I pulled out my atlas and tapped in the number he'd given me. A low beep sounded as it opened, and I glanced over my shoulder in panic. The professor snored loudly, and I breathed a sigh of relief, hurrying into the room. Shelves and shelves of ingredients, potions, and magical items stretched out ahead of me, but luckily for me, they were alphabetized with labels under each row. I moved to the first aisle, finding several jars of Aquarius moonstones starting off the A's. They glittered like diamonds, and my heart leapt with excitement at finding exactly what I needed to implement the first stage of my revenge against Seth Capella. I grabbed one of the stones, pocketing it with a wide grin on my face. After my run-in with him this morning, I was doubly ready to exact every bit of vengeance on him. I checked the list and hunted for the first item, 3 flakes of dried pepper bark. It wasn't long before I located it. The bark came in a little tub, and I carefully wrapped a few of the flakes in a tissue before tucking them into my satchel. A thrill danced through me as I moved down a few aisles, searching for mother of pearl. I found tiny pots of it alongside large mussel shells where the scrapings had come from. I bagged one of the pots and moved on to the next aisle, hunting for my final item, a 2-inch yellow crystal. I searched the Y section and the C, but couldn't find any sign of it. When I was on the verge of giving up, a glint caught my eye. I headed to the far end of the room where a window overlooked a dark room, but something glittered within it. A red switch beside me was labeled lights, so I flicked it and my mouth parted at the beautiful sight unfolding before me. A long, tubular room swept out ahead, and on rows of long tables seemingly glowing from various tubs, jars, and glass tubes were hundreds and hundreds of crystals. Every color under the sun twinkled back at me, segregated by their unique hues. Excitement sped through me as I opened the heavy door and stepped inside. An icy gust swept over me, and my breath puffed out as I walked down one of the aisles, hurrying towards the section of glimmering yellow crystals. They were all in jars, some in clusters, and others so big they'd been segmented into a huge glass vats of their own. A measuring rod lay at the end of the row, so I snatched it up and sought out a 2-inch crystal among the cluster of yellows. When I found one, I plucked it from its jar and turned it over in my palm, admiring its beauty. My atlas pinged loudly, and I cursed, yanking it out, expecting to find a warning from Diego, but instead it was another message from Orion. Lance, maybe green this time? Although green as a nickname isn't quite so catchy. The suspense is killing me. A laugh escaped me as I tucked my tablet away with the crystal. I put the measuring rod back and hurried back to the end of the room. I headed out the door, shutting it behind me and switching off the light. I strode toward the next door with a skip in my step, but before I reached it, it swung open. My heart lurched wildly, and I dove behind it as the professor walked into the room. He yawned, moving down an aisle and humming to himself. I caught the door before it swung closed, adrenaline surging as I rushed out of it and then broke into a run through the lab. I shoved open the door into the corridor, my eyes locking with Diego where he stood at the far end of it. I grinned, waving my satchel at him triumphantly, and I charged in his direction. After my classes, I'd head straight back to my room, brew this potion, and be myself again. My foot slid out from beneath me as I hit the puddle my coat had formed earlier, and my heart lurched into my throat as I fell backwards and my ass impacted with the ground. Ow! I groaned, pushing myself upright and finding Diego there to pull me up. You all right? He asked, starting to laugh. Yeah, I rubbed my ass, hobbling along as I shook my sore ankle, refusing to let anything dampen my mood right now. Thanks for looking out for me. No problem, he said brightly. Next time I need a lookout, I know who to ask. To be honest, Tori's probably a safer bet when it comes to this sort of thing. No way. You were doing great until you slipped over and nearly broke a leg, Diego taunted. That's the problem, I said. Whenever I try to pull something off, well, something impressive, I always end up on my ass.